morning, boys and girls. We're going to be reading chapter 21 of Black Beauty today. For the next 2 weeks, there's going to be filming at home rather than school since everybody's out of the school building, so that's why it looks a little different. We are going to start reading chapter 21. The time that we read, we were hearing that Joe Green really showed that he was growing up. Do you remember what he did? He stopped or tried to stop these two horses from being whipped for no good reason. They were trying to haul these heavy bricks and it was too heavy for them. So Joe went to court and spoke against this man who ended up going to jail for his treatment of the animals. So he was standing up for someone who these horses couldn't stand up for themselves. We're going to read about a couple of changes that are going to happen in Black Beauty's home now in chapter 21. Now, I had lived in this happy place 3 years, but sad changes were about to come over us. We heard from time to time that our mistress was ill. Do you remember that Mrs. Gordon was ill? That's why Black Beauty went to the doctor that night. The doctor was often at the house, and the master, Squire Gordon, looked grave and anxious. Look, grave means very serious and anxious. He's really worried about his wife. Then we heard that she must leave her home at once, country for 2 or 3 years. The news fell upon the household like the tolling of a death bell. Everybody was sorry. And they're actually not sorry about Mrs. Gordon. They're sorry because they have to leave that house. But the master began directly to make arrangements for breaking up his establishment, which means his home and all the land, and leaving England. We used to hear it talked about in our stable. Indeed, nothing else was talked about. They're going to all have to leave this house. This has been their home for 3 years for Black Beauty. John went about his work silent and sad, and Joe scarcely whistled. There was a great deal of coming and going. Ginger and I had full work. The first of the party who went were Miss Jessie and Flora with their governess. They came to bid us goodbye. A governess is sort of like a teacher and babysitter for these girls who are probably in their teenage years. They hugged poor Merrylegs like an old friend, and so indeed he was. Then we heard what had been arranged for us. Master had sold Ginger and me to his old friend, the Earl of W. Now, this is kind of strange, but in a lot of old English books, they leave out the actual name of the person, and it just says the first initial. This character is the Earl of Westland, but they took that name out. For he thought we should have a good place there. So Ginger and Black Beauty are going to this new place. Who are they going to be with? The Earl of W, or the Earl of Westland. Merrylegs he had given to the vicar. And the vicar is the person who works at the local church, who was wanting a pony for Mrs. Blomefield, a woman at the church, but it was on the condition that he should never be sold and that when he was past work, he should be shot and buried. Well, that sounds terrible, but it actually is pretty nice of them to do this for Merrylegs, because Merrylegs would be better off dead than to be with a terrible owner who, like in the last chapter, beat horses down for not being able to, do an impossible task like have that cart come out of the mud. So they know that Merrylegs should not get to that stage of life and be beaten down. It would be better for him to stay in the same place, and then when he can't work anymore, for him just to be put down. And some of you maybe have pets who have been put down before when they get to a really unhealthy part of their life. So it's, I would say, not a bad thing for animals if they're at an age where they can't really enjoy their life anymore, or they can't work. Joe was engaged to take care of him and to help in the house. So I thought that Merrylegs was well off. And look around. So John needs to get a new job somewhere. Evening before they left, the master came into the stable to give some directions and to give his horses the last little pat. He seemed very low-spirited. I knew that by his voice. I believe we horses can tell more by the voice than many men can. Have you decided what to do, Joe? He said, John, he's asking. I find you have not accepted either of those offers. John said, no, sir. I've made up my mind that if I could get a situation with some first-rate colt breaker or and horse trainer, it would be the right thing for me. So he thinks that would be the best situation, to be a colt breaker, which is breaking in the horse, getting them used to having a rider. Many young animals are frightened and spoiled by wrong treatment. We know that's true from Ginger, which need not be if the right man took them in hand. I always get on well with horses, and if I could help some of them to a fair start, I should feel as if I was doing some good. What do you think of it, sir? I don't know a man anywhere, said Master, that I should think so suitable for it as yourself. You understand horses, and somehow they understand you. And in time, you might set up for yourself. I think you could not do any better. If in any way I can help you, just write to me. I shall speak to my agent in London and leave your character with him, which means say good things about who John is, what his character is like. Master gave John the name and address, and then he thanked him for his long and faithful service. But that was too much for John. Pray don't, sir, bear it. You and my dear mistress have done so much for me that I could never repay it. But we shall never forget you, sir. And please God, we may someday see mistress back again like herself. You must keep up hope, sir. Master gave John his hand, but he did not speak, and they both left the stable. The last sad day had come. The footman and the heavy luggage had gone off the day before, and there were only master and mistress and her maid. Ginger and I brought the carriage up to the hall door for the last time. The servants brought out cushions and rugs and many other things, and when all were arranged, Master came down the steps, carrying the mistress in his arms. I was on the side next to the house, and could see all that went on. He placed her carefully in the carriage, while the house servants stood round crying. Goodbye again, he said. We shall not forget any of you. And he got in on John. Joe jumped up, and we trotted slowly through the park and through the village, where the people were standing at their doors to have a last look and to say, God bless them. When we reached, and this shows us everybody loved Squire Gordon and Mrs. Gordon, everyone in town, and all of their servants loved them, because they treated everybody with such respect and kindness. When we reached the railway station, I think mistress walked from the carriage to the waiting room. I heard her say in her own sweet voice, Goodbye, John. I heard, God bless you. I felt the rein twitch, but John made no answer. Perhaps he could not speak. He's probably too sad to speak, is what's going on here. As soon as Joe had taken the things out of the carriage, John called him to stand by the horses while he went on the platform. Poor Joe. He stood close up to our heads to hide his tears. Very soon the train came puffing up into the station. Then, 2 or 3 minutes, and the door was slammed to. The guard whistled, and the train glided away, leaving behind it only clouds of white smoke and some very heavy hearts. When it was quite out of sight, John came back. We shall never see her again, he said. Never. So he thinks that possibly she's going to die in this new country that they're going to, that's going to be bright and sunny. Then they're also going to lots of different places, so they'll not see her at least again. He took the reins, mounted the box, and with Joe, drove slowly home. But it was not our home now. And that's the end of chapter 21. It's also the end of part 1 of this book. So this book is broken up into 4 parts. Part 1 is really almost all about Birtwick Park, Black Beauty's first home. But we are going to start part 2, which is another home. Remember, he's going to the Earl of W. That's the new boss. And as you can see here, the next chapter will be about Earl's Hall, which is the new home. And then 2 more homes after that, 2 more sections of the book. So what do you think the new home is going to be like? Hope that he has some owners who are as nice as before, but we've already had a few times in the book earlier where it's hinted at eventually Black Beauty having somebody who does not treat him as well as Squire Gordon and John Manley did. So we'll find out more about that in the next section, which we start next week. You will have a test to take on Monday over all of part 1. This will be really mainly questions from the quizzes that we've been taking so far, review by just looking over your notes a little bit, but you don't really need to study this. One of the things you could do is look back at the quizzes that you've taken before on Bright Thinker. And I will talk to you all later. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.